We are pleased to welcome you back to our 2020-21 Frank Gehry International Visiting Chair in Architectural Design. Douglas Cardinal, for the second in a series of 4 events. Robert Levitt, our Associate Dean Academic, will introduce you to Douglas and to Arthur Dyson shortly. But first, I want to acknowledge our land and donors. I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Daniels honors Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future, here and around the world, and we wish to pay respect to local elders, including those of the lands from which you are joining us virtually today. Named in honor of Frank Gehry, this endowed chair brings a highly recognized international architect to the Daniels faculty to deliver a public lecture and enrich the student learning experience each year. Heather Reisman, founder of Indigo Books and Music, and 45 other donors contributed $1 million, matched by U of T, to establish the chair in November of 2000. It is named for the Toronto-born designer of the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain, the Experience Hall project in Seattle, and the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. Now back to our host, Robert Levitt.
Thank you, Rob. This event is the second in a series of 4 events that will take place today, February 25th, and on March 25th. During the course of these events, we will delve into the work and life of our honored 2020-2021 Frank Gehry International Visiting Chair in Architectural Design, Douglas Cardinal. Tonight, Douglas is not alone. This evening's event is a conversation between him and Arthur Dyson. These are 2 architects whose careers in certain ways have paralleled each other. Both are of the same generation. They came of age in the late 1950s, towards the end of Frank Lloyd Wright's life, and were guided by Wright's architectural philosophy. Both men spent time at Taliesin and absorbed the lessons of Wright's organic approach to architecture. And both men spent their careers tuning these approaches to their own unique voices. Douglas Cardinal's architecture was guided by his experience of the Canadian prairies, where he was born and raised. Arthur Dyson's architecture was likewise heavily influenced by his milieu in California. After some early work with Bruce Goff and William Gray Purcell, Dyson began his own practice, which has been based in Fresno since 1969. Over the next 50 years, Dyson has designed over 700 buildings. His work includes large private residences, libraries, offices, churches, temples, and schools. In all of it, the techniques of organic design are visible. You can see it in the use of polygons and curves, and in the way that each structure bends and folds in response to specific sites. Dyson's work isn't confined to California, but it is clearly the beneficiary of the atmosphere of innovation and invention of the California of the 1960s and onward. His work is also bound to the causes of civil rights that came to a head in that decade and that are an unfinished project with renewed urgency today. Dyson's work has been influential because he has also been committed to passing on his knowledge. He was the dean of the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture from 1999 to 2002, has lectured extensively, and serves on many school advisory boards. Dyson has received too many awards and honors to list here, but please look at his firm's website to get the full measure of his recognition. Tonight, we have the rare opportunity to see him in conversation with a peer, one of Canada's most celebrated architects, Douglas Cardinal. Both Arthur Dyson and Douglas Cardinal see their architecture in ethical terms and are dedicated to building architecture and practices that care for the needs of those communities either neglected by architects in society or worse, segregated and impoverished by urban and architectural means. Tonight's discussion between Arthur and Douglas will focus on how their architecture and practices have broadened architecture's social commitments to community and equity. The structure of the event this evening will begin with a short presentation, first by Douglas Cardinal, then another by Arthur Dyson, followed by a dialogue between the two of them. and ending with a dialogue with members of the audience. I just want to remind you that if you have questions, which we hope you will, during the event, please use the Q&A function instead of the chat. You can find that at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will answer questions from that, from those posed there. So please join me in welcoming back Douglas Cardinal and welcoming Arthur Dyson to the Daniels. And we look forward to the conversation. So we'll begin with Douglas.
Thank you. Thank you for the fun of sharing my experiences with you all and my work. I last time talked about the spirit in architecture, and what I want to say is that for me, I want to bring back the spirit of the water in architecture, the spirit of life. The water brings life into the world, and it nurtures life, and all living beings on the planet are born out of water, the experience of water. So in concerning myself in entering into the language of water as flowing through my work and in the expression of my work, I couldn't use the normal tools of T-square and triangle that are all straight. So there I decided I would totally computerize my office so that I could use forms like this that you see on the screen that were programmed by a group in Texas for me to be able to create forms that would relate to water. All water wants to return to the form of a sphere, so it never goes in a straight line. It meanders and always tries to come back to its original form of spherical forms. So it's always moving and moving back and flowing back to these forms. And so the only way I could express that was through the tools of computers. So we totally computerized our office back in the 70s to do this building. And it's the first building ever done on a computer. So as I was designing this building using arcs of spheres and flowing, having the architecture flow through the building, because the water is the source of life, and I wanted to bring that life into the very form of the building. I wanted the building to almost evolve out of water as a water creature like we all are on this planet. And so for these people, they wanted a center for their new city because Edmonton was trying to take it over as a dormitory, and they said, we are a city. And Edmonton said, oh, well, you don't have anything there. You just are a bunch of houses. And so then they all got together and asked me to work with them to bring their vision into reality. And everybody in the community was involved in this. And I mean, they all formed committees and the whole community got together. And so then we created this structure, which was out flowing along the river like the water, and the building itself flows. And so I used a brick as because I could have brick be used to flow in any shape that I want, but I didn't have brick in straight lines. I even traveled the brick so that the brick traveled around the shapes and forms. And this is the main plaza, and this is the main entry to the center. And it has arts center, performing arts, library, everything that a center part of a city should have. And here, even the water, runs over the glass to cool the atrium. And, uh, and so water, the forms inside, see, are all flowing. There's like a flowing street inside, almost a flowing river of people inside. And on the side next to the river, there's a flowing walkways that flow along the river. And as you see, the brick is all traveled, so it's always, it flows with the building. And we use brick because they could fire the brick out of the clay from the silt of the and clays of the from the water, and use that as a material inside and out. So everything flows like grandmother water flows. The spirit of the water flows everywhere in the building, and the inside you can see it's all brick flowing, and so all the shapes in the interior are all flowing. Shapes on the outside are all flowing, and these are stairwells to the main streets that flow in the front of the building. You can see how the brick travels. It's never straight. It's always moving, and you can see these are walkways. And also, all the functions on the river, the people use the building as almost a way to view all the things that are happening on the water. And then this building here on the river here at the University of Saskatoon in Saskatchewan is also a water creature. They wanted Indigenous people wanted to have a center that follows respects their ceremonies. And so this is a building that grows also out of the water. It's a water creature itself. It's formed out of the water, but using the stone that is formed also out of the water. It's limestone that's compressed, and the whole campus is made out of that stone. And in the center, the building opens in the four directions, heaven and earth, in order to bring ceremonies. To bring a sacred pipe in that building, it follows the protocol so that elders can have ceremonies and share them with all the other students. You can see the opening to the heavens and to the stars, and even the wood on the site. We had to cut a few trees to put the building where they wanted it, but we took those trees and had a ceremony to be able to use them in a good way as part of the experience inside the building. The whole building faces south and embraces life from the south, as well as the four directions. This direction faces north. The colors emphasize the four directions. You have the four colors and the four directions, because always how we connected ourselves, our spirit, was to the four directions, heaven and earth. We connected ourselves to the source of all creation. And in connecting yourself to the source of all creation, you become a sorcerer because you're connected to the source. You become a magical being. So here in the inside, you can see the flow and the form of water, reshaping every form. Grandmother water shapes everything. So the building is always alive and vital. And you can see the shapes and forms of the outside, and the buildings around it are all more rectilinear shapes, but the president wanted a shape that would capture the spirit and essence of the land and the people, and so this is the spiritual place. And so also in Phoenix, Arizona, there's a very powerful woman who was actually Kurdish, immigrant, who decided that she wanted to give health care to people that can't afford it, like all the migrant workers. And she had me meet her at the river there that is flowing along the water, and she was very powerful woman, a kind of person you could never say no to. She was such a powerful force herself. And so this building, of course, is, she really, as a woman, was a water bearer. And so because all life comes, women are the life givers. So women are sacred creatures. They give us all life. And so the building had to follow that very powerful image of the water, and also of the female form, which is the nurturing form, and the life givers of all life in the planet are the females that are water carriers to create life. And this is a healing center. So that's the shapes and forms she wanted. I worked with her until she said, yes, that's me. That's what I want to express my caring for people. It's about loving and caring. The elders always told me that the most powerful thing is love. Love is much more powerful than force. The force of love is the most powerful force on the planet. And so she wanted to do that in expressing the building forms, not only in the inside, but the colors of the area and the colors of the land, but also the form of the building and the water and the banks of the river. And we walked along the banks, and she was very strong, and very powerful while she walked. She was so determined to get her vision into reality. And so all these forms are following the water forms, the grandmother's spirit of the water, grandmother water. So that's bringing the spirit of the water into the form itself. Anyway, I just thought I would show you how I work with the spirit of the water, and the tools I use are computers, because they can then draw these segments of elliptical forms and have things flow through the building. So, Arthur, I sure would like to see your work. It's so beautiful, and share your inspiration.
Douglas, thank you so much for sharing your work, and it's great to hear the genesis of the work, the spirit behind it, and you can certainly see it here. Robert, thank you for the kind introduction, and Douglas, it's a privilege to be with you. It's an honor to be with one of the world's most talented and respected architects, and all of you out there are going to learn much from him. This is truly a master architect. I see what you're seeing on the screen here is some of our work. This is University High School, which is a stainless steel structure in Fresno. This is a library in Central California, done about 20 years ago. This is going to give you a glimpse of some, those are my granddaughters and my wife inside. The work that Douglas and I do shares a spirit and a philosophy, although they're very different in scope. Most of my work is smaller. This is where we're broadcasting from now. This is the interior of my office in California. This is the conference room. This is a project under construction right now, a Buddhist temple. This is a little church, Bakersfield. This is another church in Central California. This is an upcoming project, a Japanese cultural center. This is an aquarium, Central California. This is a house in the foothills of Porterville, California. As you can see, the work is very different. Each one from the other is very different. These are all very client specific. So you see different shapes, different forms, different materials, depending on where they are, when they were done. This is a house in Central California. This is another home that we did many, many years ago. Probably 40 years ago, I think now. Another home in Central California. It's another home in the foothills. This is a home just built in Santa Cruz, California. This is a children's center. This is a high-rise building in Fresno. This is a farmhouse. This is a home in also in the valley, in the foothills, interior of that same home. Another home up in Portola Valley, copper. Interior of that same home. Another view of the interior. It's another home in Central California. So you can see the vocabulary changes, the material changes. This is one in Minnesota, Owatonna, Minnesota. This is a home in Richland Center, Wisconsin, a very small home, one bedroom, about 1,000 square feet. Another home in Central California, another home, another small residence, a residence in Sanger, California. Another home in Madera County, California. This is a home in Eureka, Montana. This is a home in St. George, Utah. This is a home in Panama City Beach, Florida. This is right on the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of technology from NASA was used on this to combat some of the hurricane wind forces that this is exposed to. This is on the Fresno State campus building, and this is a homeless village that we're in the process of doing right now. This is a little homeless sleeping shelter. We did these are a couple concepts of also sleeping shelters. And this is one that we just completed. It's another sleeping shelter for the homeless. And so that gives us an introduction to some of the work that we do. As you see, each work is very different. My undergraduate work is in philosophy. And so I have a 31-page questionnaire that I ask my clients. And it gives me a direction to go. I've always felt that each client has an inner blueprint that they carry within them. And we want to try to find some of those things that will reach back to the strings of the hearts of our clients. And for me, architecture is more than what you see. It's how your mind processes what you see. So for me, it's more about the intangibles than the material items themselves. And give you an example of that. It's a story I've told before about one of the clients that we've had. And I started out as an architect wanting to design work for blue collar workers, mainly for folks that were not really able to secure the services of an architect. And that's what most of the work that we did over the years was and still is. The Hilton House was an example of something other, but the first client that I had that really had any means almost shocked me with some of the things that they had within their homes. And as I looked around inside of their home, they had wonderful art objects. They had wonderful paintings. They had sculptures. And I said, if you had to evacuate this home at a minute's notice, of all of these things, what would you take? And without hesitation, they both pointed these two little glass goblets that their children bought for them on their 20th wedding anniversary. It was the first time that their children realized the importance of that date. And so as an architect, we designed a niche to house these little goblets. But at the same time, I made sure with the introduction of a small clear story that we put in the house, that on June 5th at 5 o'clock, the sun hit those goblets. And that was the date and time of their wedding anniversary. So architecture is about things that you really, like I say, can't see apparently right away. The sun is a wonderful thing. I mean, we know the sun angles, we know the sun position any place on earth at any moment, at any given time. And so if nothing else, you can make the sun shine on the face of your client the first thing in the morning on the day of their birthday. We did a small children's center in a community called Orange Cove in Central California. And at the apex of the skylight that we put in, and the skylight was built of obscure glass, but in the center of it, we put a clear glass opening. And if we track the sun on the floor, that clear glass opening will create a flat figure 8 on the ground. And so we could track the position of the sun and calculate where it was going to be every day of the year and every time of the year. And so we put a dot on noon the first day of every month. And so if you came in and your birthday was on March 15th, between February or March and April, we would put a star and the sun would hit your star on the day of your birthday. So that's some way that you can use something as an educational tool for students. It's interesting. Robert Frost, the American poet, wrote a metaphorical poem. And in that poem was called A Mending Wall. And he said, if I were going to construct a wall, I would first ask myself 2 questions. What am I walling in and what am I walling out? It's a great question for architects. What do we want to bring into the building? We live in a society right now where we are so cut off from nature with our buildings. We have no connection. We no longer hear the songs of nature. We don't necessarily know whether it's raining unless we're standing near a window. So we don't hear the wind in the trees or the birds anymore. We hear mechanical sounds, air conditioners, garbage disposals, dishwashers, but we don't hear those songs of natures that were soothing to human beings. And those are, we've lost a little bit of the connection to nature that we have. And that's something that we've tried to draw into the buildings that we do ourselves. I'm interested to get into a conversation with Douglas because, like I said, we share a kindred spirit. I think a lot of the work that we do is motivated in the same direction. I think we both have made a commitment to social consciousness, and I think is important for all architects to have, to try to save nature as much as we can, to fight for the rights of all human beings. I think that that's an important part as a fellow human being. One of the things that I've tried to, that's been a very difficult thing for me, and Douglas, I don't know if this is for you or not, is to really get clarity in the work, to try to find a way to simplify some of the work that we do. And that reminds me of a story that Thoreau, when he wrote a letter to a colleague, and it was a 12-page letter. And at the end of the letter, he apologized for the length of the letter. He said, I'm sorry that this letter was 12 pages long. I just didn't have time to write a shorter one. And it's not easy to develop clarity and simplicity. It sounds like it is, but it isn't. But that's something I think we all strive for. Another thing I think that gives strength to architecture is the polarities. That certainly you can see that in other arts. You can see that in the culinary arts, where you have something that's sweet and sour, something that's soft and hard. Those polarities give real strength to art. And Douglas, I can certainly see that in your work. And I made a few notes here so I don't get too lost. But one of the things that I think as students that I would really encourage you to do is learn as much as you can about construction sciences, learn about statics, learn about color psychology. There's a new field in neuroscience that really is giving us answers, empirical answers to things that over the years we've probably known anecdotally. But they give us another insight into how the human mind works and how it processes what we see. Color, for instance, if we were in a room that were all red, that would change us physiologically as well as psychologically. Our respiratory rate would be higher. Our perception of time would be distorted under that. So learn as much as you can about those things to help inform your work as you progress along. So with that background, how do we start this conversation, Doug? What, how can we pass something on to the students? The students hold the future in their hands. And I hope that all of you will have the courage to seek alternatives. I know that Douglas and I don't think either one of us ever became architects to repeat what somebody else had already created, but to find a new way, to find a better way, to create something that never existed before. Not to be different, but to be better.
Yeah, I think you were talking about your experience as when you were learning about architecture. You were talking one time with me about how they asked you to sketch parts of buildings that you liked so that you could use them to express your work. Like knowledge was almost already done, and one's job was to take the knowledge that was already out there and create with that. So
yeah, I think that there's too much of that that's done. I think that more than anything else, people ask what you're trying to do, what you're really trying to do. You're trying to do something meaningful, something that's relevant. You want to find the strings that reach the hearts of your clients. Too much, I think, that we do is off of the hinges of custom rather than off of the hinges of reason. Bruce Goff used to tell a story about a woman who was preparing dinner, and she was preparing a roast. And before she put it in the oven, she cut a little bit off of each end and then put it in the oven. And her daughter asked her why she was cutting off a little bit of each end. And she says, well, I'm not sure. That's the way my mother always prepared her roasts, and they were delicious. So they asked the mother, and the mother says, yes, I remember doing that. I did that because that's the way my mother prepared it. Mm-hmm. And so they finally asked the great-grandmother why she prepared her roast that way. And she says, yes, I remember doing that. The reason is I only had one pan and it was only this long. So all this time, these people were doing something because someone else had without really realizing it. So I would certainly encourage all of you young architects to question everything. Question if it's the best way, not just why somebody else did it, but question if there's a better way. Find a better path.
Yeah, it's, I think that people have to really start creating a new paradigm, a new world. We have to do that. The way things are happening, we have to approach things entirely different to solve the problems that we have got ourselves into by not
Well,
respecting the planet. And so we have to be very creative. And I think one thing that I wanted to share with you is when my elders wanted to have me enter that domain of creativity, they said that we all have been given this marvelous gift as human beings, the power to create that makes us godlike beings on this planet, because we got this tremendous gift to create. And that is something that we should do responsibly. And you have to understand, the elders said, this, the creator can take all of man's knowledge and put it in the palm of his hand. That's what we know. And also that's what we don't know. And because that's defined knowledge, like I don't know how to fly a 747. But all that knowledge that we had, the creator can hold in the palm of his hand. All that knowledge in books and computers and everything has already been created. Now, he said, but from what has already been created, the creator is holding in the palm of his hand, but from the edge of his fingers to the edge of the universe, that hasn't been created yet. That's where the true power is. Like if you really want to be a warrior, spiritual warriors, you have to leap off that world of what you know into that vast abyss of what you don't know, you don't even know, because that's where creativity is. It's not in what you know, it's what you don't know, you don't even know. That's where creativity comes from a blank sheet of paper. You're to create something new and exciting. Now, that is the land of the eagle. That's where the shaman is, not in the world of what is known, or you didn't get that from a book or looking at other, writings or listening to other people. You have to be a warrior and leap off that domain and enter the power of the eagle. Like Einstein didn't get E equal MC squared from a book. He got that from leaping off what is known into that vast domain of the unknown. And that's where power is. And so I suggest as students that you perhaps throw your books aside. That's all dead knowledge, that's information that's already been created, and seek the creativity within yourselves, because you have that ability to create. We all have. We have that marvelous gift, and to explore that.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that a lot of students fear the unknown. And sometimes that fear is justified because of the grading system that we have. It's the fear, and so if they do what they know they can do well, they don't really learn, but they will get a good grade for it. And so if you can work with your instructors to let them know that you're going to try something different, and that's how you learn. We learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. I think that students need to realize that within each one of them, there's something that never existed before, something that's new and unique in all the universe. And don't take that to your grave with you. Too many architects have. Find that inner voice that you have and nurture that, and try something better. Try to create something that never existed. There's great joy in bringing something new into the world.
Yeah, and it's all about fear, people are always afraid, afraid to try anything new, afraid to try anything different. We live in fear, and it's all in our minds, you know. Our minds are not our friend a lot of the time, because our minds are trying to keep, you know, make sure they keep this bag of skin intact. And so, oh, don't do this, you'll get hurt. Don't do that, you'll get hurt. But as a result, you know, you're not being able to accomplish anything. You have to understand that really our fears are based probably on fear of death. But hey, what do we got to lose? We're not going to get off this planet alive anyway. So why not? What the hell? Why not go for it? You know, go down in flames. You know, you're only going to live once. And so why not really live and just don't not live in fear, but live in. It's like when you get out of that living in fear, it's like a roller coaster ride. You get a real high by taking chances, and sure, you're going to fall flat on your face, but even if you're falling flat on your face, you're still moving forward, you know. So there's a lot of things that I have, you know, a lot of mistakes I've made, but I've learned a lot in the process, a lot of what not to do. But that's knowledge. That's good knowledge.
Well,
I can't hear you, Arthur.
Dyson, you are.
I think I just muted myself. I think I'm back on.
Good.
I
yeah.
think that what I was talking about, Douglas, was contextualism. And I hear sometimes professors telling students that, well, that's not really contextual. It doesn't fit in with what exists. In the
Yeah.
buildings that you showed us, where they're surrounded by square and rectangular buildings, and you have flowing buildings there. So in an urban landscape, you haven't replicated what's already there in this urban forest, but you become the flower rather than another leaf or another weed in the garden, in the urban garden. You become the flower, and that's something that I think a lot of people are afraid to do.
Yeah.
So,
And I noticed that what inspired you to become an architect, Arthur?
I think what inspired me was what I didn't see more than what I did see. And I noticed right away that there were so many different types of people, but it seems like they were all living in the same types of homes, operating in the same types of buildings. And I thought that there might have been a better way. How about you? What inspired you?
I think the same. It just seemed that everything was so dull and lifeless and meaningless. And rather than walk through our urban centers, particularly in North America, I would rather walk in a forest that's vital and alive and always changing and moving. But some, like the older cities in Europe that are sort of went through time where people just kept building and had new ideas, and every time you turn a corner you see something exciting. I like the old cities of Europe, but not any of the cities in North America that are too almost devoid of feeling and separate from nature, you know?
Very rigid, very
Yeah.
rigid. Yeah, I agree.
And I noticed in all your forms, you're not doing boxes, but you're doing very exciting sculptural forms. What are they?
Thank you. The Hilton House, the one that we did that is on the Gulf of Mexico, was a house that was inspired by the affinity of the client for curves, and she was fascinated by the ocean and the waves. And this was right on the Gulf of Mexico. But on the other hand, we also had to resist hurricane winds. In this house last year was hit by Hurricane Michael, which was the strongest hurricane that's ever recorded that hit the coast of America. And it destroyed almost everything around it. But through a lot of the aerodynamics and information that we were able to get from NASA, rather than create lift with the winds on the roof, because of both the shape of the roof and the upper and lower textures of the roof, we were able to create a down pressure so it didn't lift the roof up and throw it out like it did most of the other homes. So we were completely unscathed by it. So there are a lot of different things that bring things obviously into meaning, and the reason that we create something looks different, not trying to be different, but to try to be better. And something that will uplift the human spirit within when you're within the building. We do also a number of schools, and we have knowledge now of different elements that we can use that will help retention and comprehension. It would accelerate that. There's so many things that we know that we didn't know before. We have so many materials that we didn't have 10 years ago. It's a wonderful time to be an architect.
Yeah, I feel that too. It's just absolutely a wonderful time.
I love what you did with the brick, and I like what you did with, it was never static. It always changed. Each wall changed. And the textures changed in the way you used it. And kind of reminds me of some of the ways that they prepare food in areas like New Orleans in the Cajun cooking, where they will use what they call the Holy Trinity, which is peppers and onions and carrots, and or actually celery. And but they'll cook it down, and then they'll put another portion of the same thing in and cook it, and it's the same thing, but it has different textures and colors and materials. So 3 materials actually become 6. So, oh, I see Robert's joined us.
Yeah, no, I never went away, but I've simply appeared. I wanted to ask both of you if you might speak about the way some of the themes you've brought up now about, the creation of new ideas or new ways in architecture relate to some of what the 3 of us were talking about the other day, which is how you find yourself able to design sometimes for communities who are not generally well addressed by architects, whether they are Indigenous communities or the homeless, how you think that some of your invention and alternative ways of thinking about architecture have helped you address some of these, I guess I'll say other communities that are not within, not often the object of attention by more conventional architects.
Since we're working a lot right now, I'll start this off, Doug, on some of the homeless communities. The last shelter that I showed was a small sleeping shelter. And we have extreme climates here in Central California. It's very cold in the wintertime. It's very hot in the summertime. And the Indigenous peoples that lived here didn't live here year round. They went in the foothills when it got too hot. They were smart enough not to try to withstand the heat. And so you either do that, or you have 2 different buildings. You have one facing south that works in the summertime, and one facing the north that works in the wintertime. We couldn't afford to do that. So this little guy that we designed is on a turntable. So he can follow the sun, so we can turn him around easily. But more than that, the shape of the building itself is based on some of the studies that the psychologist Skinner did in his theory of refuge and prospect, where early man felt safe in caves or areas where his sides and back were protected, but he could see out into the savannas, into the hunting areas. And homeless folks that have been not housed for years don't feel comfortable shut inside of a house, but they do feel comfortable if they have at least that one side open. And so this little shelter that you saw is like a little cocoon, but it's based on that theory. So it's not some whimsical thing. It's something that's based on some of the data that we know how human beings react to their environment. And I know Douglas has also been working with some of the Indigenous peoples too in some of their areas.
Mhm.
Well, I was just wondering, Arthur, your feeling that architecture has a social responsibility, that we have a responsibility to the communities that we're serving. And maybe you could talk about what you've been doing in that area as well.
Well, I certainly do. I think as a human being, we have a need to do that. Unfortunately, there are not funds to do that. So all of the work that I've been doing is all pro bono, but it's my way to help make it a better community. It seems to me that those that are in the greatest need are the ones that we should be helping the most. And that's what we're trying to do. Actually, the little village that we designed, a homeless village, is based on the camp, Taliesin West, that Frank Lloyd Wright created. And so when I was with him for the first year, we lived in tents. So each apprentice working with Mr. Wright lived in a tent in the desert, but we had co-housing. So we had shared locker rooms, we had shared dining space, we had a shared kitchen, we had a shared drafting room, a shared library. All of those things were on campus. The center that we designed is the same way, where you've got these little pods, and that's why so far we've designed 3 different sleeping pods to try them out to see which one works best, because I don't want to build 50 mistakes. We'd like to build one at a time, try it out, have folks live in it, and critique it. And so this has a shared housing. It has 3 components to it. It has the sleeping units. It has a shared co-housing that has a laundry, a kitchen, dining area, a social area, and then it has an economic driver. It has a 3rd building that will be used for counseling to help get folks the tools that they need to get them back into society to function better. It also has a retail outlet and a place for folks to create something that they can sell. And so if there are, say you get several artists together and they create some works and they were able to sell something, the way that this would work is 1/3 of that sale would go into their pockets, 1/3 of it would go into the operation of the center, and 1/3 of it would go into a savings account that they could then dip into once they leave this center. So that's just another way of looking at something.
Arthur, I have a question for you. You said that you do it pro bono, meaning that you forego any design fees, or are you actually, I mean, who is paying for the actual building?
The buildings itself, so far, there's a group of about 6 of us that just citizens in the area that have pooled our money together to build these. But after we started this, we had the Unitarian Church give us money to build one of them. Temple Beth Israel gave us the money to build the second one. So now we're trying to get community support, because I think it's better to have, and then Fresno State University built the 3rd one for us. I think it's better to have the community involved in it as much as possible.
I mean, I just think it's interesting because it's not only your design for people with whom you consult to help to develop proper design strategies for them, but also I think this pro bono aspect. I mean, I think it's not only the orientation of the design, but actually the in a sense the capital of the office. It's building a certain kind of practice which gives back. And I feel like that was something that you brought up as a kind of a principle of how you practice as well. Anyway. I just wanted to call attention to it, underline that aspect of what you are up to.
Well, it just seems like we're all in this together, and as much as we can do to help each other, the better off we are. If we can help the most vulnerable in our society, we create a stronger society.
Right. And Douglas, you had brought up you had brought up a project that you didn't show today, but you had talked about particular ways that you were designing for Indigenous communities that reflected particular community values. I think in your first talk you spoke about that. I wonder if you might have anything about that you wanted to add.
Yeah, but particularly what I'm concerned about is giving the communities a voice and the kind of facilities, the kind of living they want, the kind of relationship to family and it's respecting their culture and how they want to relate to each other, particularly through family. For example, right now, they are, the government is doing housing for elderly people. Okay, and so they have funds for elderly people. And even in the Native communities, there's a lot of money for the elderly. But what's happening is they put the elders in an old folks' home, and that separates the elders from the community. And the elders have the knowledge and the wisdom and the language and everything else. So it's another way of eroding the culture of the community by separating the elders into old folks' homes. I know that I just walked down the street here, and down the street there's an old folks' home, and in there are people a lot younger than I am, just sitting there, just waiting to die. What a terrible waste of energy! What a terrible waste of knowledge! Because we decide that in our culture that we only want people that are productive and will turn out whatever we want them to turn out fast, and we're wasting all the knowledge of the elders. And I feel really sad for them as I walk by and see them wasting their lives away, and because they're not into the fabric of society and things like that, that we've got to look at what the heck we're doing, and how we're treating people in our society. And so and also the kind of things that we're doing in education, what we're doing really is warehousing children in facilities that are not inspiring and not exciting to be in. We're programming them to be in boxes and classrooms in boxes. So we're giving them an environment that is all walled off from nature and from each other. And it's all a bunch of cells and bells. And what kind of education is that, where you can shape your environment, but in turn it shapes you? And no wonder people are always thinking in terms of boxes in our minds. We're boxed in our minds so that we can't even think of being creative at all. We can't, and I feel that is the worst thing you can do to a child, is to put them in that kind of environment.
Yeah, I agree too. I think that the educational opportunities there in architecture are wide open. And again, we're learning more and more through studies in neuroscience on the value of the educational environment and how that shapes the minds of children. Children are not meant to sit down and sit and be quiet for hours on end. Even the seating arrangements, if they can stand up and get down. We did a school here recently where the school district uses fluorescent lighting, and that's changed a little bit right now. And fluorescent lighting essentially is a strobe light. And if you are autistic or on the autistic spectrum, you see that as a strobe. We don't see that, but they see it as individual lights. And trying to study under that type of a situation is caustic to kids. But also you have young kids whose eyes haven't fully developed yet, staring down at glossy tabletops with the reflected light back up at them, which gives kids headaches. It's hard for the study. And so what we did was curve the ceiling and shoot the light up on the ceiling. So when that diffused light came back down, it not only didn't throw a glare, but there were no shadows. You could hold your hand over on top of the table and not see a shadow because of that. So there are a lot of, like I say, there are a lot of unseen things that architecture can do. It's very powerful and it's a great tool. But unfortunately, schools almost have a prescribed formula. Classrooms are 32 feet by 28 feet. I mean, there's certain things. And so we know from studies that almost 40% of the kids can't hear all of the words that are spoken by the instructor in a classroom. It's not designed acoustically for that. Doug, we talked a little bit about the Lakotas and about black elk, and he wrote about how he thought one of the worst things that the colonists did to his people, in addition to taking the land away from them, was to put them in these oppressive gray boxes where it killed their spirits. It separated them from nature, where they lived in a world, almost a circular world, where they knew they could see that the sun was circular. They could see that the moon was. They didn't know that the globe was circular, but they knew that there were cycles and seasons. And a lot of them lived in roundhouses or teepees, and a lot of the arrangements were round. And to put them in these rectangular things just absolutely killed their spirits. I think that happens to a lot of us. And I think that architecture, instead of nurturing people, are torturing people.
Yeah.
But to live in a building like Doug Cardinal has done, where you're surrounded by three-dimensional poetry, just has to uplift the human spirit. You're not closing off nature. You're not not enclosing people. You're embracing people. There's a big difference there.
Yes.
So architecture is such a powerful tool.
I do have the impression, I mean, for instance, when Douglas, you talk about the forms of your architecture, and like, for instance, this evening you introduced the forms through their relationship to water and flow. But from the conversation now, I have the sense also that that flow and fluidity is related to a social one, where it's, in some ways for you, the flow is the opposite of segregating people and separating them. It's a way of connecting. And so the flow is the formal flows are also social flows and social connection. Does that seem
Yes.
a reasonable description?
Exactly. I think if everything should be done to connect people together instead of segregating them, and having them feel a connection with each other, but the way we're designing our spaces, we try to create walls, as you were saying, around our functions and each other, and don't have spaces where people come together and and flow together and relate to each other. And people don't think about the people that are in the spaces at all and how they should relate to each other. I know when I went to university, I took sociology as well as anthropology, but sociology, and I think of how people relate to each other. And I think architecture really is almost applied sociology, and you have to be sensitive to how people respect each other and relate to each other and connect with each other. And I know that I was asked to do a school up north for the elders, for the children, and the elders said, we don't want our children to be sitting in rows and having somebody up front telling us how to live or whatever. Everybody should be part of this circle where we all connect with each other. So we don't want square classrooms. We want more circular classrooms, and the teacher has to come off the podium and come and join the circle because we all need to communicate with each other in that way. So, and also they wanted to be able to have large windows to be able to connect with the environment outside. And I remember the Edmonton School Board one time deciding that they wanted to cut out all windows because it distracts the children from the teacher, because the kids are looking out the window instead of listening to the teacher. So they decided to cut out all the windows in the schools, and so I got this commission, of course, where I was to design a school for the school board, and I couldn't at all even think of designing a windowless school to the school board, who were actually in an office with floor to ceiling windows. I mean, they themselves had to relate to nature, but they were going to deny all these children. And so I took the commission and designed the whole school with windows and opened it up and the shapes and forms and everything. And when I presented it to them, of course, they fired me right on the spot. So this is the kind of stuff sometimes. But then it seems that you have to take on the whole system sometimes to get anything reasonable for people to live in and to enjoy, particularly when you're designing spaces for children. It's very difficult because they all have these standards, and whoever create these standards, should have their heads examined.
It's perverse that they should not recommend for the students what they allowed for themselves. I just, while we're here, because it's beginning to, we're at 7:40, I just want to encourage members, well, people who are attending this evening's event, if they do have questions, to please begin to post them. I know that there were a few questions, but they were about issues that had been really addressed in the last lecture. So if any of you in the audience who are participating tonight have questions you'd like to, or thoughts you'd like to share, please put them into the Q&A part of the Zoom meeting.
On back to educational facilities, in California, we have a system where charter schools now are arising, and so it's not it's a diversion from the old-fashioned unified school districts, where they're allowed a lot of different opportunities to seek alternatives. And we're working with one right now that actually just got an approval from the school board last night to move forward. And they want a completely different curriculum. They're actually going to be working, it's a K-6 school to begin with, and then it will evolve from there. But they're working with the zoo. And so a lot of the classrooms will be actually outdoors. But it's right across the street from the zoo, and they want to do something very different. Look at educational opportunities, very different. And not only that, but it's for a disadvantaged area. So that's going to be something very exciting.
I don't want to change the course of the conversation, but I do want to give a chance for some of the thoughts from the audience to come in. So I'm going to read you a question, and it's for Arthur. Benjamin Johnston is asking, if being from California during the 60s, do you think that West Coast music and cultural revolution from the 1960s influenced your architecture in any way?
Probably, yeah, that's a great question. I think we are. I think we're influenced by what we see. We're influenced in different ways. A lot of the architecture that I saw influenced me in a very positive way because it was so negative. That drove me to try to find something better to want to do. But our architectures, I learned a lot about, I think, form and composition through music rather than architecture. And that's why my work doesn't look so much like other architects, but probably to me looks like some of the music from different folks. One of the reasons that I have a questionnaire that's so long is because I want to know my client's favorite childhood play area. I want to know what type of music they like. I want to know what kind of food they like. I want to know where they feel most comfortable sitting in a restaurant. I want to know their favorite vacation spot, whether that's around water or trees. Those give me clues. But writing and music and sculpture and architecture, all of the arts are fundamentally related, and basic elements of composition are common to all of the arts. So for instance, if I have two clients and they both like classical music, one of them likes Beethoven and Bach, and the other one likes Stravinsky and Debussy, that tells me that one of them likes something very monumental and heavy, and the other one likes something very light and athletic. So those are clues that I get to help me design the work to come up with an environment that I think really will enhance the lives of those clients. So yes, I very much was influenced by music, certainly by writing. I was very much influenced by Maya Angelou. And I grew up in Southern California near Watts and Compton. And so I heard a lot of the gospel music from churches that really led into rock and roll before that happened. So I was a part of all of that.
Great, Arthur, thank you. I have another question that could be for both of you, and it's from Jacqueline Rothlob, who is our development officer. She wants to, let me read it. Can either of you or both of you speak about the relationship between the architect and the trades and construction workers who execute on the design? How have you found that the best way to work with the industry, and do you consider this a collaboration?
Well, I'll jump into this first. I worked my way through school as a carpenter. So I learned how much I didn't know, and I learned how much people that have done this for a lifetime do know. And so I've always considered workers part of my extended design team. So if I'm not sure how to do something and I want to do something that hasn't been done before, I'm going to ask the people that do it rather than try to find a solution and tell them how to do it. And so we work with them. So I have great respect for the craftsmen that we work with, and they're being great help to me.
Yeah, same here. I work very closely with the trades, And you can see a lot of my work is masonry. Well, I will sit down with the masons. I will start sketching, and then I will sit down with the masons and I'll say, "What do you think? Can we do this? How can we do it?" And then they come back with some of the most amazing solutions because they're excited about pushing their trade and to be able to get away from actually building boxes. If they have the chance to do something artistic and creative with their trade, that excites them. And so they said, you're trying this way, but you can do it this and this way. And I can even cantilever it over here and form an arch over here. And I could do this and that. I said, really? Yeah, let's go for it. And so I work very closely with the trades. And,
oh, sorry.
And always, while I'm even putting the building together, I work with the trades.
I think Douglas, you had in your first talk when you'd spoken about St. Mary's, you had described a great deal of inventiveness in the solutions that you had derived or arrived at for the construction, and I wonder if some of those were things that came from those exchanges with the masons or anyone else involved in the construction.
Yes, they were. Even the brick itself. For example, people were using old brick because it was made out of kilns that were like beehive kilns. And so the brick was over-fired in the center and not fired very much at the edge. So it had a total variety of colors, but also how they stacked it in the kiln. It meant that it would warp in different shapes. And people loved that old brick. It had real character to it. So then I wanted the same kind of brick. So I went to the brick manufacturer and said, I want something that's not so perfect. You got such perfect brick with the same color, and it's I know it's amazing brick and whatever, but I don't want a brick like that. I want something that looks like it's handmade, something that looks like it has variety, and so and I kept telling them that I wanted them in a sense to screw up their kilns, because they were too perfect. And so what they did is say, I think we could do this for you. So they stacked, they had these things that went through this tunnel kiln to make perfect brick, and they stacked it all wrong, and they put it through the tunnel kiln, and then they varied the color and the shape. They totally screwed up the whole process. And at the end, they put it on the ground and said, "What do you think?" I said, "That's perfect." I said, "Put it in a dump truck and deliver it to the site." They said, "We won't go that far, Doug." They put it in pallets and delivered it to the site. But it was sometimes the manufacturer has to be realized that sometimes his product is too perfect and doesn't feel right. And so then that became their best seller. So they'd call me up and say, "Now, do you have any other ideas how you want us to make brick?"
I remember a similar story from Louis Kahn's work, in which the steel for his British Museum of Art at Yale was considered substandard product by the manufacturers, and they didn't want to give it to him. But he said that was how he liked it, and he had to forego a warranty on the materials in order to use them that way. They considered them unfinished. Sometimes architects see beauty and virtue in materials differently than manufacturers. The questions are kind of piling up, so I'm sorry. We could dwell on many of them, but I wanted to keep moving on a few more. And this one is for Arthur. I've lost track of who asked it now, but it's someone observes that there are many angles, sharp corners in your work. What is the purpose of these? How do you feel about them when you do them? And the questioner wants to make sure you understand that they are someone who loves your work.
Oh, that's the person. Great.
Let's see.
Get the name and address.
Striker Sessions.
It all comes from the clients, as you can see, and that's why I showed you a number of slides, because some of them are very curvilinear, some of them are angular, some of them are more rectangular, different shapes just depending on the client and on where they are. One of them is very angular, that one that you might have been talking about, because it's in an area of rolling hills, and I wanted to have some presence in there to make a statement. I think that one of the things that we try to do as architects is to create something that appeals to the client, that always changes, that has a sense of mystery to it. But again, it goes back to whatever the inclinations of those clients are. Some people wouldn't feel comfortable in that home, others would. So again, it really all comes from my client.
Okay, and then I have another one that I really have to make sure I get to, which is this is from a retired member of our faculty from landscape architecture, John Danhe. Do any landscape architects inspire your work?
Well, I think that I almost regard my work as there's soft landscaping and hard landscaping, and I think my building is like hard landscaping in a sense. I like to feel that it's part of the land, and yes, I'm very inspired by working with landscape architects, and we work together back and forth, and I think that the building and the landscaping almost come together seamlessly, like they should flow together. And so that you're not painting walls, like you say.
I agree. I was inspired by a number of landscape architects that were more naturalists, like Tommy Church, certainly Jens Jensen. And then I grew up in Southern California, and Gerrit Ekbo was a modernist landscape architect. Also had a little bit different direction, more mid-century modern in different vocabulary materials than Tommy Church or Jens Jensen.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question, I think, that also kind of comes full circle on some of your earlier discussions about creativity, unleashing one's creativity and facing the unknown, perhaps. Anyway, it's for both of you. If you were to start your own school of architecture, what would make it unique from all others, and make students want to apply to go to your school?
Well, one of the things that I think Frank Lloyd Wright stressed was the study of all of the arts, not just architecture. For me, if you study composition in other forms of art, you might not be as inclined to try to repeat what's already been done in architecture. Sometimes forms are very powerful. Certainly, Douglas Cardinals are very powerful. Frank Lloyd Wrights were very powerful. And when you see something that's that powerful and that beautiful, sometimes I think young architects get overwhelmed and think that maybe they don't have them within themselves to try to do something. But if you study architecture from compositional elements in music, even culinary arts, dance, music, writing. Writers have a different cadence and rhythm that they use with their style of writing. All of those things will kind of inform the direction that you might learn from to put that in your own work. But the main thing, and Bruce Goff was very good at this at University of Oklahoma, was to find that inner voice that students have. Don't lose that. Have the courage to speak out and speak with a strength that they have within them.
Yeah, I feel the same, that you need to look at all the arts. And for me, the foundation for me was music and the composition of music, and that was for me a really good foundation. But also art in general, the expression of art, music and art, and I think and explore creativity in as many ways as you can, in writing and dance, whatever, you know. And for me, it was also very much come out of my own culture, my own native culture, that art is expressed in everything that we did. In fact, it was almost, if you did, no matter what you did, whether it was a spoon or a headdress or a jacket or anything, you had to do it in an artistic way. You couldn't leave it alone as a human being. You had to create something beautiful with it. And so whether it was even a spoon or anything, you had to make it into a work of art. In some way, you had to elevate it to not just being functional, but being functional and express something with it. So it was like part of your human nature to do that.
I think both of you would like to inspire students to think broadly, think innovatively, find their own voices. We've run out of time. It's 8 o'clock. So I want to thank both of you for this evening and for sharing your thoughts, and Douglas for sharing more of your work with us, and Arthur for joining us for the first time and sharing your work and thoughts as well. It was a great evening to have both of you. Great to have both of you here and inspiring.
My pleasure, and also want to encourage the students to, again, reach within themselves, create work like Douglas Cardinal, where if somebody writes about it, they can't end a sentence without putting a punctuation or an exclamation mark at the end of it.
Before everybody goes, I just want to remind them of, let's see, the next, well, first of all, the next event with Douglas in which he talks with students is coming on February 25th. It also is at 6:30. So to see or register for any of the Daniels events this year, just head to the news and events page of the Daniels faculty website. All of you are here already know that. And then the next event at the Daniels faculty is called Methodic Optimism. It's being given by Felipe Magalhães, Ana Luisa Soares, and Ahmed Belkhodja. They are of Fala Atelier, who have been visiting with us. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did with Douglas and Arthur. All right, good night. And I wonder if Douglas and Arthur, you might just hang back as we close the event down.
Sure.